evening, and welcome to the regular meeting of the Kernersville Board of Aldermen. There are many important things on the agenda before us tonight, and we're glad you are here to join us. Today is Tuesday, September 7th, and we welcome everyone who is watching us by streaming. I'll call this meeting to order. We'll begin with an invocation by Reverend Pete Kunkel, First Christian Church of Kernersville.
Would you stand with me as we pray? Heavenly Father, we come into your presence tonight, and we just ask you to be with us, be with this meeting, be with the aldermen and the mayor, and all the others who are here tonight. Lord, we pray for Mount Tabor as the kids go back to school. What a horrible incident that was. And Lord, we just pray that you be with the families and with the young people and just help them as they work through this. We pray for the people of Afghanistan. We pray for the people of New Orleans and Tennessee and Kentucky and even to the northern states, the flooding and all the different things going on, and out to California to the forest fires. And Lord, we just pray that you would bring peace, that you would bring strength, that you would bring healing, and that we that can help in many, many ways to ease the pain of other people. I thank you for this city. I thank you for what it means to this community and how much we have been blessed as a community. Bless us now, for we pray this in Christ's name. Amen.
Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. Reverend Kunkel, would you like to say a few words about the community event you planned for Saturday?
Yes, Saturday we're going to do a community service, and the Lieutenant Governor will be here, Mark Robinson. Sheriff Bobby Kimbrough will be speaking also, and our officer who was shot, Sean Hool, will also be speaking that day. It's just going to be a day of hope and encouragement, because we feel that almost the whole world needs it right now, and certainly our community needs it. So if you'll come and join us, it's from 4 o'clock to 5:30 this Saturday afternoon. Be plenty of seating. It'll be at East High School. They've been gracious to allow us to use the stadium. So come and join us, if you would.
Thank you for your recognition of Officer Hool of the Kernersville Police Department, and for your recognition of police officers and firefighters in this week of 9/11.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right, so we have a long policy printed on the front page of the agenda, but I assure you it's important. So it's on your agenda, it's on the screen once we scroll up, and I'll review it briefly. We have 3 public hearings tonight, and so this policy applies when we have a public hearing. When an agenda item is denoted as a public hearing, persons attending Sorry, my internet just flipped out. I need to get back on the same page. All right, here we go. When an agenda item is denoted as a public hearing, persons attending shall be permitted to address the Board of Aldermen regarding the item under consideration. Those speaking in favor speaking first, and those against speaking second. Proponents and opponents shall each be given 20 minutes of time to speak, and may choose to allow one speaker to utilize that time or choose to allocate the time among different speakers. In the event that either proponents or opponents have not designated a speaker or speakers to represent that view, the mayor shall divide the 20 minutes by the number of speakers wishing to address the Board of Aldermen, and each such speaker shall be allowed that given time within which to express his or her comments, ideas, concerns, expressions, and desires. After the opponents speak, the mayor will allow the proponents 5 minutes for rebuttal. If the proponents choose to exercise this option, the opponents will also have 5 minutes for rebuttal. In the event the proponents do not present a rebuttal, then the opponents shall be given no further time to speak. So at the back of the room, there are speaker cards, and many of the people here who wish to speak have already filled out a speaker card. But if you would like to speak on any of the public hearings, public hearing 1A, which is an annexation, 1B, which is a text amendment, 1C, which is the rezoning, please fill out the speaker card and bring it to the corner of the table where our town manager is sitting. Mr. Swisher, could you raise your hand? To that gentleman's table, and we will put you in line to speak to that item. If you'd like to speak on any of the public session items, you may also fill out a speaker card. And there are 2 opportunities at each meeting to bring an item to the board that is not otherwise covered on the agenda. 2A is speakers from the floor, and at the end of the agenda, we also have item 5, which is speakers from the floor. So if you're here and you'd like to address the board on a non-agenda item, please feel free to do so, but fill out a speaker card so we can recognize you at the appropriate time. All right, we'll begin with a presentation on item 1A from our Community Development Department.
Thank you, Mayor Morgan. I will cover staff's presentation on the 3 public hearing cases. They're all related. There's a public hearing on annexation, a public hearing on a proposed text amendment to the Unified Development Ordinance, and a rezoning case, case 788. Regarding the annexation, is a 203.57 acre annexation off Macy Grove and Salem Parkway, 421. 48.26 acres is within the Salem Parkway right-of-way. The remaining 151.31 acres is the actual land area, which is also the rezoning area. Staff is recommending approval of the annexation. The site and the surrounding land uses. This is looking south over Triad Business Park. This is looking east over the Kernersville Medical Parkway. On the transportation, of course, the Macy Grove Salem Parkway US 421 interchange, the primary purpose was to promote economic development. And we've seen Triad Business Park building out the Medical Parkway area. Now this area here being proposed tonight for rezoning. Access to the development site is off Macy Grove, Witch Station Lane, which was constructed during the Macy Grove interchange construction. Truck traffic has been prohibited on the Kernersville Medical Parkway, which was shifted the traffic to the Industrial Parkway Drive. There was some traffic issues early on when the Kernersville Medical Parkway first opened up. That's at City Street. We prohibited truck traffic that once was traveling down Macy Grove Road, but now is prohibited, so Industrial Park Drive. So the primary access to this area will be 421 Salem Parkway or Industrial Park Drive. Regarding the text amendment, the petitioner is Curtis Swisher, town manager, agent for the town of Kernersville. The purpose, the town originally drafted and adopted the business industrial zoning district to apply to the Triad Business Park. So this is a text amendment to the business industrial district that we formulated for the Triad Business Park. The proposed amendments are to clarify the standards of the BI and enhance the buffering between business and residential. The BI zoning district standards is primarily intended to accommodate a wide range of business park and limited accessory commercial uses. The building and site standards, hard wall facades, enhanced street yard, exterior lighting shall be cut-off lighting fixtures. Cut-off lighting fixtures are lights that cast downward to prevent, the scattering of light across property lines, and enhanced buffer yards along residential. One of the primary concerns was the transition between the single-family neighborhood off Macy Grove and the site. When we were looking at this site, we've been looking at the site for about 10 years, and staff did some early analysis of the site. There's a gas line that goes through the site. And really the only place you really put a road is along that gas line. From that site plan, the developer has come in and did some conceptual layouts. The primary area of concern is the single family residential area shown here. So with that concern, we looked at the buffer yard standards, and originally the BI district had a 40-foot buffer area, and here's a proposed amendment to enhance that. So the buffer yard, the minimum buffer yard width shall be 40 feet adjacent to residential zone property containing a single family residence, and the planting shall meet the 15-foot type 4 buffer yard planting standards. That's the heaviest standards we have in our UDO. If a development has a semi-tractor trailer, loading docks, and or parking within 150 feet of a single family residence, the minimum buffer yard shall be, and this is what would apply to that area adjacent to the existing single family, a minimum of a 100-foot buffer yard along the entire development property line, a 15-foot berm within that buffer, a minimum planting meeting the 15-foot type 4 buffer yard planting standards. The buffer yard planting shall be placed on top of the berm. Also a 6-foot security fence on the business side of the berm, or an alternative to that, maintaining a minimum of 150-foot undisturbed wooded area. To do a little illustration, or one other item, where the 100-foot buffer yard is required, it shall be extended along any drive to be used by delivery trucks or delivery truck parking, loading areas at a minimum distance of 700 feet from the residential zone property containing the single family residence. So what that means is, so that this area of concern, so you'd have a 15-foot buffer, a 15-foot berm within a 100-foot buffer area. There's a wooded area here that would remain undisturbed. And so adjacent to the single family, you'd have a 100-foot buffer yard or this undisturbed area. Within that buffer yard, it would be a 15-foot berm, the plantings of a 15-foot type 4 buffer yard, the buffer yard planting on top of the berm, and then a 6-foot security fence on the business side of the berm. And so that is what the developer worked out from the last meeting. That last meeting, they could ask for a continuance so they could meet with neighbors and continue to try to refine their engineering to create as big a buffer yard as possible. Another concern early on, even before North Point came along, was the stormwater aspect. So on the eastern side of this area, there's a culvert that is having some difficulties withstanding some stormwater surges. So the original design, we were looking at some ponds with the flow going to that creek, which would then go to that culvert. There's also a farm pond right above that culvert. So what the developer went back and looked at is, and engineered, was that he would move the stormwater. The stormwater shall be diverted around the residential zoning property when feasible, or additional stormwater peak shall be provided for a 2-year, 10-year, and 25-year storm. So they're able to engineer most of the water away from that culvert area. A slight amount would go towards that culvert, but would greatly reduce the amount of stormwater that currently goes there. And I believe the developer tonight will have some greater illustrations on that. Just some existing conditions that were looked at the last meeting just for clarification. The highway corridor overlay. This area is exempt from the highway corridor overlay because the business industrial zoning district has its own standards. We cleaned up the language of sidewalks. The sidewalks are really drafted for some unique things, and Triad Business Park. They would be required to build a sidewalk on one side with a 5-foot sidewalk with a 5-foot grassy strip along that public road going into the park. Regarding loading docks, we modified the loading dock provision. to make sure we would allow loading docks also to the front of the buildings versus just to the rear. Because loading docks is typically where you may have the most noise. And so we amended allowing for loading docks to face that new public street. Now on to the rezoning. So the rezoning being proposed is business industrial with the amendments that staff just discussed. The petitioner is Michael Johnson, agent for owner with North Point. The owners of multiple uses. See staff report for a complete list. The proposed rezoning would be from Forsyth County Single Family Residential RS20 and Guilford County AG Agriculture and a conditional use light industrial district to the Kernersville Business Industrial. The original application had 141.89 acres. It's been updated after the surveying for the annexation at 155.31 acres. This is a general use rezoning in a BI zoning district, so it's important to note that the general use rezoning, no conditions can be placed on a general use district rezoning. Uses cannot be limited. During a general use district rezoning, petitioner is not allowed to state their intended plans. The plans that we are talking about tonight are conceptual. The general district rezoning does not allow for a dedication of right-of-way or road improvements where needed to address an increase in traffic. Conditions needed to address intrusive land uses caused by rezoning to a more intense use. However, in this case, as it covered already, basically we're using the business and zoning district has been drafted with enhanced zoning standards to address issues typically needed to address through a conditional use rezoning. So really we're using the business industrial to condition this project to address the adjacent single family residential. The BI uses, staff discussed the uses with Samet Corporation. Since the BI zoning district also covers the Triad Business Park, they have a few small out parcels remaining that fall within the current list of uses. Staff does not recommend any changes of the BI uses. One of the major issue with any rezoning case in Kernersville is the urbanization of the area. Here's the site, Amazon site to the north, the FedEx ground site to the north, to the southwest, the VA and the hospital. And you can see this area is urbanizing to some very heavy non-residential uses. With those urban uses, you come noise, light, and traffic. North Point, the developer, reached out to neighbors regarding additional mitigation for the noise and lighting. Staff drafted the BI text amendments to make sure the noise and lighting mitigation takes place. And so what North Point worked out with the neighbors, they expressed they would do, we added into the text amendment I covered tonight. Regarding the recommendation, the planning board and staff, approval of the text amendment KT 265 is presented tonight by staff with the additional enhanced buffer yard and stormwater standards. Approval of the rezoning with the following motion. Move to amend the zoning ordinance of the town by rezoning the properties in case K788 from RS20 AG CULI to BI. The said rezoning be consistent with the town's comprehensive plan and further being both reasonable in the public interest because the Kernersville Development Plan Land Use Plan recommends this area for businesses. Business industrial has enhanced design and site plan standards, and highway improvements have been completed for this area to support economic development. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Hatling. Does the board have any questions at this time of Mr. Hatling? Okay, thank you. All right, this is a public hearing, actually 3 public hearings, but before we get started, let me ask for some clarifications on the speaker cards. I received one from Allison Walls and Robert Everhart. Which case or which matter did you want to speak on, Allison? Yes, you may. So do you want to talk about one of these cases that we're about to hear, or do you want to be a speaker from the floor? Is it related to the annexation or to text amendment? Is it related to zoning docket K 788? Okay. Okay, I'll call on you then at agenda item 2A. Okay, thank you. Okay, that is the only speaker card I have that hasn't identified what agenda item. So I have speaking on 1A, 1B, and 1C, Blake Day, Allison Bragg, Chris Chancellor, Mike Fox, and Jonathan Ballinger. Mr. Ballinger, you had a question mark by you're in favor? Okay. Okay. How long do you think it'll take to share with us? Okay. All right, and Tracy Gray, how long? Hi. How long do you think it'll take you to speak? How long? Okay. All right, thank you. All right, Mr. Ballinger, I'll put you after Tracy, if that's okay. All right. Okay, so there was one presentation from Mr. Hatling of our Community Development Department. He's the director of the department. But there are three different but related things, because we've got the annexation, which just applies to this property and whether to move it within the town limits. We've got the text amendment, which, as Mr. Hatling referred to in the presentation, applies to both this site and also the business park that's got, Triad Business Park that's got FedEx and Amazon and some other businesses in. So whatever changes to that business industrial zoning district would also apply to any undeveloped properties in that business park. So we'll hear that as a separate public hearing because it could have different concerns. And then of course there's the rezoning, which has a lot of interest. I only have the two speakers for it, so is there anyone else who was planning to speak who lives in that area on the rezoning? Could you fill out a speaker card? I've got Tracy's and I've got Jonathan's, and that's all I've got. Okay. Could you fill out a speaker card and so I can call on you? Yeah, they're in the back at the table. Our officer's going to hand you one. Thank you. And did you just have a question about the rezoning? Okay. All right. So we have a countdown timer. Just in interest of everyone knowing exactly what is going on and being informed, we have a countdown timer that runs 20 minutes, is devoted to each side for a public hearing. Alderman Boyer operates the timer. Because it's so, we really want to hear what you have to say. And so when you approach the microphone, if you'd like to, you can take your face mask off to speak. If you don't want to take it off, you can speak through it. The microphone will likely pick you up just fine. So we won't count against somebody walking up and then taking a moment to take their face mask off. I know we've all seen the governor do that however many 100 times this past year. Take your face mask off to speak and then put it back on before you leave the podium. And we won't count that against the time. The time will run down, but roughly, everyone should roughly have about 5 minutes. Mr. Fox, you, Chris, Allison, and Blake, I think, are sharing time. Are you expecting an equal division of time? All right, well, we'll just run the clock down then for you. All right, I will now declare the public hearing open. And the first speaker is Mike Fox. If you could state your name again for the clerk's records and your address.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My name is Michael Fox. I'm an attorney representing the applicant here tonight with an address of 400 Belmead Street in Greensboro, North Carolina. One point of clarification, are we doing the combined 3 hearings, or are you doing annexation, then text amendment?
This is a public hearing on the annexation.
Okay, we can be very brief on that then. We support the staff's recommendations. We do feel that this meets the statutory requirements for annexation and an urban area, and so we would ask that the board approve the staff recommendation for annexation.
Thank you. Mr. Day, did you want to be heard on the annexation? Ms. Bragg? Okay. Mr. Chancellor? Okay. All right. Mr. Ballinger? Okay. Ms. Gray? Do you want to be here on the annexation? Just the rezoning? Okay. All right. Ms. Hudgens, if you'd like to come forward, you can ask your question. She just has a question.
Cheryl Hudgens, 432 Burnt Mill Road. So the property in RS 20, I know they have a section that they're not building on. It looks like RS 20 is also the property behind my house. So I would like to know if this is talking about both of them or one of them.
Okay, Mr. Hatling, could you address that? We'll need to pull up a map. Do you need her address? If you could state your name and your address for Mr. Hatling.
Cheryl Hudgens, 432 Burnt Mill Road.
So 432, the property behind 432 is not part of the rezoning tonight.
Okay,
That is owned by the Chapels.
correct.
Yes. So yes, the property directly behind you is not part of the rezoning. That's Dave and Loris Chapel. It's just the property to the east is in the rezoning.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Okay, is there anyone else who'd like to speak in favor of the annexation? Okay, hang on a minute. Anyone else in favor of the annexation? Seeing none, is there anyone opposed, Mr. Ballinger? And it's okay to just have a question.
Hello, Jonathan Ballinger, 6112 Ballinger Road. I have land at 553 Macy Grove Road. And my question is, at the zoning meeting, they kind of went backwards and they're kind of doing it that way tonight in a way. You're approving it for anything they want to put there, and whatever they put there can be anything from recycling plant to chemical manufacturing to a whole list of things: mining, battery storage, coal production, hold on, helicopter pad, hotel, skyrise, liquor stores. There's nothing they can't put there. And I'm not at all opposed to what plan they drew up and are presenting tonight. But if they're going to do this other stuff, I think there should be some limitation for the neighbors to know that they can go in there. They can say tonight anything they want to and come back tomorrow and do whatever they want. And I don't think it's a good plan to give that authority to a developer without any restrictions whatsoever. And so that's my problem. And the water runoff, they have it drawn originally over my property, and it's not where it normally would go. But that's what I want to address. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Hatling,
Do you want to?
do you have a list of the?
You want to speak about that during the text amendment and rezoning, or you want to do it?
Okay, have you got his question written down?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. All right, is there anyone else in opposition to the annexation? All right, since there was no one in opposition, there's no rebuttal from the proponent and no rebuttal from the opponent. So I'll declare the public hearing closed. Does the board have further questions, discussion, or do I have a motion? And this is for the annexation. Okay, motion by Alderman Cruz to approve the annexation. Is there a second? Second by Alderman Thompson. All those in favor, raise your hand. It's unanimous. The motion is approved. All right, item 1B, which is a public hearing text amendment. Curtis Swisher, agent for the town of Kernersville, for a proposed zoning text amendment to the UDO, amending Chapter B, zoning docket KT 265. I'll declare we've already had the presentation. I'll declare the public hearing open. I have Mr. Fox, Mr. Day, Ms. Bragg, and Mr. Chancellor. Mr. Fox?
Thank you again, Madam Mayor, and we can be brief on this one as well. Representing the applicant, we are in support of the changes to this text amendment. They do reflect the work that we were able to do with the neighbors to add additional protections for them, and so we're supportive of it and happy to answer any questions if you have. And I'll be the only one speaking on this, unless you have other questions.
Thank you. All right, is there anyone else to speak in favor? All right, Mr. Hatling, Mr. Ballinger's question.
Regarding the uses, staff did look at that. I think it's very important to understand the markets. The market aspect for business industrial zoning district is primarily, geared towards the business park uses, but your uses, potential uses more are closer to the interchange. Certainly could be some more commercial type uses. I think, but it's important to note the whole purpose of the text amendment is to create detailed standards to address the transitional areas between residential and business. So there are standards to address the different uses. There is no connectivity between the commercial and the residential areas. The standards that we apply tonight would buffer any commercial or any non-residential uses from residential. Regarding stormwater, the property that the person who just spoke, his property is located in the right off the southeast corner of the proposed business park. As described in the stormwater conditions, actually less water will be flowing into that creek basin, and any water that does flow into from the development will have, we're proposing stronger stormwater retention standards. So any stormwater issues he currently has would be addressed through those two measures.
Okay, thank you. All right, is there anyone here to speak in opposition? All right, seeing none, there's no opposition, so no proponents rebuttal and no opponents rebuttal. So seeing none, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Is there any questions, discussions, or do I have a motion? This is for the text amendment.
Ma'am, thanks. Mr. Howling, can you pull up the uses again? Because I'm trying to locate them. Exactly what's available. I've looked at both attachments under B and I don't see them. Can you pull them up, please? Or tell me where to locate them real quick. It's under C. I can have a minute to review this.
If someone didn't hear that, we're now on page 4 of the documents attached to agenda item 1C, which is a list of permitted uses in the BI zoning district. If you're following along on your phone. Jeff, could you display that?
Is it part of the text amendment or not? If so, wouldn't it be under B as well?
As Curtis Swisher, Town Manager, described on page 4 of the staff report, you'll see the BI permitted use table.
Yes, Mr. Howling, I found it. Thank you, Mr. Swisher. But we are on B, and this is found under C, correct?
Correct. Yes, this is for on the zoning district, describing so it's 788 is rezoning. In its rezoning staff report, we listed the permitted use table.
Okay. If we're doing it as a text amendment, shouldn't it be listed there as well? Okay.
Yes, in the text amendment, we're just showing the ordinance changes, and there's no proposed ordinance changes to the uses.
Okay, so there are no changes.
Right, there's no recommended
Uses,
changes to the
okay.
uses.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. That helps a lot.
Do you have any other questions? Okay. Any further questions or discussion? All right, we are considering item 1B, the text amendment zoning docket KT 265. The changes that if we adopt the text amendment, the changes would apply to any property in the BI business industrial zoning district, which is currently tried business park and proposed for this parcel once we get to the rezoning.
Okay, I do have one more question.
Okay.
Mr. Howling, so if we approve this text amendment, then on the rezoning, we couldn't go back and change the uses, correct?
Correct. You can, at a later time you can, but tonight, in this text amendment in front of the Board of Aldermen, no proposed changes are recommended for the uses.
So no changes could be done on the rezoning.
Correct.
Thank
Yep.
you.
Yeah, that was brought up at the planning board meetings. So after the planning board meeting, staff went back, looked at the uses, discussed with Triad Business Park. We did not see any uses that were more or less intrusive than the other. I mean, basically, as I described, it's kind of like some people call it form-based zoning, where you're creating a zoning district with enhanced standards between uses, and that's your primary goal. Some people would maybe prefer a manufacturing plant open from 8 to 5 and not have a shopping center. Well, others prefer a shopping center that's open 18 hours a day. So I mean, there's pros and cons in all non-residential uses, but the goal tonight in this text amendment was proper buffering and screening and addressing stormwater.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Hatling. Any other questions? Okay, do I have a motion?
To approve item 1B.
Okay, motion by Alderman Thompson. Do I have a second? I have a second from Alderman Cruz. All those in favor, raise your hand. It's unanimous. All right, we are to item 1C, public hearing rezoning. Michael Johnston, agent for owners. Petitioner requests a general use rezoning from RS20, AG, and CULI to BI, business industrial, for properties located at the end of Witt Station Road, containing a total of 155.31 acres and being in Forsyth County and Guilford County at the pins indicated on the agenda. Uses requested, all business industrial uses apply. Zoning docket K788. I'll declare the public hearing open, and I'll recognize the proponents. Mr. Fox.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Board of Aldermen. We asked for last time. We feel like that we put it to good use. We've met numerous times with the neighbors, and you've seen the result of those meetings with Mr. Hatling's text amendment and additional bufferings and protections for the neighbors. Mr. Chancellor is going to highlight some of those for you, but we appreciate you giving us the chance to do that, and had a lot of great conversations with the neighbors there. And we would obviously hope that you would approve this tonight, and North Point would look forward to being a great member of the Kernersville community. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Chancellor.
Hi. Good evening, Mayor, members of the Board, Aldermen. My name is Chris Chancellor, North Point Development, offices at 4825 Northwest 41st Street in Riverside, Missouri. Thank you very much for having us here tonight, and I want to echo, our sentiment that we appreciate the time for the continuance as well. I think what we'll see by the presentation and the conversations that we had with the neighbors is that we had a really productive discussion with them. We came in the planning, after the planning board, we heard that there were some concerns about, the plan itself and the proximity of that plan and light and sound and other concerns. So our team immediately went to work to sit down with them and try to understand what the specific concerns were and how we could mitigate those. So we'll see that in the presentation. So next slide, please. Just a little bit about us, and many of you already know about North Point. And so for brevity, I will keep this super simple, but there's a couple of things on here that, we as an organization are very, very proud of. Number one, we are a real estate developer and a landlord that owns our properties long-term. So we are not a company that comes in. Some of our competition may develop a site and then intend to sell that within, as soon as it leases up, flip that to some other buyer. That is not the operation that we run. So we are long-term investors. We consider ourselves value investors. So in the long term, we want to see that property appreciate. And what I think this slide will show you here is that right now we have 107.4, and that seems to change almost daily anymore, but 107.4 million square feet in our portfolio currently. So that's 107 million square feet that we own and maintain. And so we have on-site property managers that spend considerable amount of time going around cleaning up trash and making sure stormwater basins are clean and everything is mowed and manicured and very, very nice, well-maintained parks. The other thing that I would say we're proud of on this exhibit is 65,000 jobs created in our parks that we have to date. So 65,000 people go to work in one of our buildings every day across the country. And, I will tell you that is something that we are very, very proud of as an organization, that we've helped to provide a number of jobs across communities across the country. And then lastly, I would say you see $7.2 million in contributions, charitable contributions. So one thing about our organization is we have a set of core values that we live by and that we operate by. And one of those is to live generously. And we do that in the communities that we're involved in, that we have projects in. So we find ways, whether it's neighborhood groups, the school district, or whatever the case may be, we figure out ways that we can give back to that community. And so we've done that since the outset of our organization, and we've given in excess of $7 million back to community groups across the country. Next slide, please. So this is just high level, kind of tell you where the project is located. I think, Jeff did an excellent job of kind of explaining all the background of it. So I think for purposes of time and everyone's brevity tonight, we'll bypass this particular slide and we'll focus more on, the site plan itself. And, what we see here is very similar if you look at it. And just step back and compare it generally to the plan that was at the planning board, you would say, well, these plans are very similar, and they are. The big difference is that in that time, what we talked about from the time that we had the planning board approval, and then we came before you and requested the continuance. We had a lot of really great conversation with the neighbors to our west, particularly to the west of Building 1 on the site plan. And one of the things that we came away from their understanding is that, recognizing that a 40-foot buffer yard with significant landscaping was pretty good screening, we through those conversations recognized that it sure wasn't enough, right? And so what we set out to do at that point is to kind of look at, whether it was light or sound or traffic or whatever. Let's figure out a way. Our team went back and figured out a way to try to mitigate as many of those issues as we possibly could for the benefit of the neighborhood adjacent to us. And so what you see here is the, kind of the culmination of that, where Building 1 has really lost a little bit of square footage on that corner, kind of has a kind of a stepped appearance now on the northwest corner of the building. And we've slid that building to the south and east as much as possible in order to increase that buffer from 40 feet to 100 feet. And inside that 100-foot buffer, we went ahead and proposed a landscape berm and some additional landscaping adjacent to the residential area to our west. And so we'll go into further detail here in just a second on each one of those particular issues. But I think, there was changes made coming out of those conversations that we just wanted to point out here. What this plan represents generally is 1.5 million square feet of potential development on the site. And what we believe is between 13 and 1,400 new jobs created on the site. a total investment from capital investment from our group of in north of $120 million. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we heard in the course of our conversations with the neighborhood and folks that showed up to our neighborhood meeting that we had last week, in addition, is that traffic in down Macy Grove and the concerns about the traffic at that intersection and needing a left turn lane and things like that. And I think what I want to point out here and what we did is early on in the onset of the project, we came in and we conducted a number of studies. One of those was a traffic study. That traffic study was scoped by NCDOT. Ultimately, the study was prepared and submitted to the DOT for their review and approval. Subsequently, they reviewed the study, agreed with the recommendations made by our consultant, and approved that traffic study. So the recommendations coming out of that were exactly as I think staff pointed out in the presentation that they made, that the interchange was developed for this purpose. So the improvements are there to support additional construction similar to what we're showing you on this plan. There were some minor improvements that need to be made to to the intersection of Macy Grove and to Witt. So at that location, we'll do a little bit of widening on that east leg of the intersection to make sure that we have appropriate right turn and left turn lanes at that location. But there are a left turn lane kind of southbound going into Witt, and the improvements on Macy Grove are satisfactory for the study, or for the site plan that you see in front of you. Next slide, please. So we talk a little bit about stormwater, and one of the things that we talked about was kind of relocating some of the stormwater so it doesn't run through the neighborhood to our west, and that it really goes back to the east, up against to the large creek that on this graphic is kind of borders the east side of that green hatched area. So what you see in red and blue, that area combined today is the area that generally drains down through the neighborhood and through a culvert that is in less than great condition today. And so what this graphic is really showing you is that of the combined blue and red area, that we're going to take all of the red area and pick that stormwater up and push it back to the east. And so what that represents is about a 67% decrease of stormwater that would normally run through the neighborhood, that now we're taking that back to the east. So a significant decrease in the amount of stormwater that would run through the neighborhood, subsequently down through that channel and back to the east through, I think, another neighboring property that someone spoke about just a little bit ago. Next slide, please. So this is going to be a little difficult to see exactly, but thank you. So what we did is we cut some sightline sections in those particular areas up against the residential area that we were most concerned about at the northwest corner of Building 1 that you can see there. And so we have 4 sections that we cut through there, A, B, C, and D. And certainly as we move from north to south, that as we get further south of section D, we have a stand of trees. It's a pretty forested area. We will leave those trees in place. If you want to slide back up there a second. So we'll leave those trees just south of the section D line. Yeah, thank you. We'll leave those in place as further screening and mitigation for light and sound and those types of things up against that particular building. But what we did in the sections, from A through D is what we're showing here is the construction of the berm. So we're building a 15-foot tall berm with the landscaping and treatments on top of it. But one thing that is really difficult to see here, and I wanted to call out, is that in addition, we actually grade building 1 15 feet lower as well than the existing grade. So while we're only building a 15-foot tall berm, you know, as we show here, you're really getting the effect of a 30-foot grade differential. And the reason why we do that in this particular case is, one, we'll see in the sound here in just a second, but we want to cut off the line of sight from any of the sound emitters. But then we also want to cut off the line of sight and use the berm, not depend on the landscaping material itself, but to use the physical berm to cut that line of sight off for any of the light sources as well.
Mr. Chancellor, you have 6 minutes left.
Possibly. So I think unless anybody has some specific questions, I'm certainly glad to come back to that at the end during rebuttal. We can move on to the next one because I think this is important here. So what we did is conducted a sound study, and this is pretty typical for us, and you know, kind of our good neighbor policy, if you will, is to understand, you know, what effect our site has on the adjacent property owners. And I think what we're showing here is that our goal is typically to get back down to a residential standard at the property line or at the adjacent uses. And, you know, for residential standard, generally you're talking about 50 decibels or lower. What we did here was without the berm, you would not have been able to achieve that, right? And so with moving the building back and adding the berm, we're able to get to slightly under 50 decibels at the property line at the nearest home, which is significant because, one, we cut off the line of sight. And when you cut off the line of sight, you naturally cut off, you mitigate for the sound as well. And so in this particular case, doing that, we were able to, you know, get from, you know, what would normally have been 55 or 60 decibels down to well below 50 decibels. So while that may not seem like a lot, generally I would tell you that a decrease in 10 decibels is for us, it's like, if it increases 10 decibels, it sounds twice as loud. So if it decreases 10 decibels, it's half as loud. And so that's really our goal here is to try to bring that down to under 50 if possible. And so I'll leave you with just, you know, a couple of the last 2 slides would really just be examples of some exteriors of buildings that we build across the country. So you can see the color schemes are different, and you know, some of the architectural details are a little different, but generally I think this gives you, you know, a sense for the types of buildings that we build. We build, you know, Class A space. We'll build in this environment, we would build a 40-foot clear building. So that's going to stand the test of time where, you know, people that come in and build a 36-foot clear building, what we know is that people want more and more volume. And so we go ahead and build that 40-foot clear structure to be able to accept more volume in lieu of building yet another building somewhere else, right? And so, so you know, that's kind of the premise behind, you know, our you know, those exteriors. You know, then what you see here is a lot of people think interior of the buildings, interior of warehouse buildings is just this massive open bunch of pallets stacked. And I think, you know, one of the things that we see all the time, we just don't appreciate as much or think about it as much, is the significant amount of tenant finish dollars that go into these buildings. And so if you look at some of these pictures, these are office spaces. Typically, each of those tenants is going to have 10, 15, 20,000 square feet of office, which is by its own right a significant amount of office space in a business park. But you can look at, you know, some of the finishes that they put in are top notch, right? And you know, a lot of our tenants use them as corporate spaces, have significant investment on their own, right? And so we talk about $120 million investment that North Point would make. That really is, just for the shell construction cost and the site work. That doesn't really count any of the additional tenant finish dollars that our tenants would make inside the structure itself. I think I just barely beat the clock. So with that, I would say, I'm glad to answer any questions that anybody has or clarify anything that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chancellor. Ms. Bragg and Mr. Day, you're not speaking right now, right? Okay. All right, appreciate that presentation. That's the presentation by the proponents. There is a minute and 30 seconds left if there's another proponent who'd like to speak. If not, are there any opponents? I've got Tracy Gray. If he'll come forward. If you could please restate your name and your address because the clerk takes it down for the minutes.
Testing. Thank you for letting me speak. My name's Tracy Gray, and I live at 436 Burnt Mill Road. And my property is directly adjacent to the corner of that building. And when I first heard about this, I was fairly upset because of my sleep as a nurse. So when I found about the law that only allows for just the neighboring property to know about the changes and stuff, I didn't feel like that was an appropriate law. And I call into question some of the laws that are written, because laws have been written and rewritten in this country based off of, moral right and wrong. At one time slavery was legal, but it didn't make it right. At one time, women couldn't vote, but it didn't make it right. And those things have changed. In our national government right now, there's things I'm seeing that I'm very grieved by. But then again, I have to look back at ourselves. What about our local level, our county, our state level? What laws have we got in place and that have written that really don't serve the people, but serve a special interest that may not be in the best interest of the people? Like this law that only allowed for just a few people to be notified. I really felt like that was meant to subvert and really play off the naivete, the ignorance, and the busyness of the citizens it's supposed to serve. Other laws, other examples, like the one that I hear is pending in the state that would allow for insider trading. Now, it's worded in such a way as to create a cap, but what it's really doing is allowing insider trading for politicians. That's another law I don't think should be allowed to pass. And laws and regulations that allow for companies like Pope Construction that built our roads to subvert and not follow through with regulations that they should have done to make these roads more substantial, that would have turned these roads into state roads. As I understand it, there's processes that should have happened that did not happen, that no one, whether it was state, local, county, that did not follow through with that. So now we are left with roads that have potholes in them that have fallen down, and they're not being held accountable. And I'm challenging y'all today, whether it's local, county, state, we could do better. We can do better to serve our citizens rather than allowing us to fall prey to these laws and regulations that aren't serving us, that leave us vulnerable and that leave us at the mercy of the benevolence of others. We have an orphaned road. Now, as I understand it, North Point has offered to assist with repair on those roads. To what extent, I'm not sure. And I'm appreciative of them being willing to step up and do that, but we shouldn't have been put in that position to start with. It remains to be seen as to whether or not, when I have to live in the moment, as to whether or not the sound changes and everything is something that I'll be able to manage. But based off of some of the promises that North Point has, given us as neighbors and stuff, I'm having to go on good faith, nothing written, that I'm aware of, but just promises made that they will do some of the things that they have, said that they will do in improving our community to make these things, to make it tolerable for us. So I just charge North Point with just following through and caring about the community. Based off of what they've said, I'm going to withdraw my opposition to this because I feel like my neighbors deserve better roads, whether or not I can live with, it right next door to me. I want the neighborhood to be served. But I feel like, as I wanted to say one more thing, I just feel like as leaders, governing bodies that have been given their position, not just by themselves, but there's a God that we have to answer to. They're shepherds, and they're supposed to care for their sheep. And our laws and our regulations and our rules need to reflect that. And I'm charging y'all and asking y'all to start reevaluating some of these laws and regulations and rules, and make sure that all the public goods being served and that the sheep are being taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ballinger? And I'd like to remind everyone to refrain from talking when there's a speaker. You can step outside if you need to have a conversation, and extend everyone the same courtesy. Appreciate it. Thank you. Mr. Ballinger, if you could restate your name and address.
Jonathan Ballinger, 6112 Ballinger Road, a property at 553 Macy Grove Road, which is south of the property. And if Mr. Hatling could pull up the stormwater drain map, I would appreciate it. My main concern while he's pulling it up is I'm south of the property, and they had all the ponds running across my property during the rezoning meeting, and I haven't seen anything different yet. But if they can tell me that it will not run across my property, that'll be fine. But they had a stream drawn through my property before. This is my property right here. It should be where they have drawn. And they still have a stream coming through it. And there's no stream there. All that blue line coming right down my property line basically, and there's not a stream there. And I don't want one there when they finish. And I would like that addressed. And that's my main concern. And also, even though I have no residential house in here, I would like a buffer zone somewhat, because I believe they got the building almost down there against me. And mainly the stormwater runoff is a problem, and they have not corrected it on anything yet. And if that could be addressed, I appreciate it. And if they're going to do what they say they're going to do, I have no problem with it. But if they want to do all these other uses, I think it ought to be addressed. And that's all.
Mr. Ballinger, the area you say their building's right up against, what's that zoned?
Mine was single residential. I believe it's agricultural now, but it was single residential.
Okay, thank you.
But this is the problem right here, this blue line.
And that's the stream.
That's the stream, but there's no stream there. Somebody cut a road through there that was wanting to come through there. and they just, not a road, but a path with a bulldozer. And so they think they're gonna run a stream there. But there should not be a stream there. And I'm concerned about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is there anyone else to speak in opposition? There's 12 minutes left if there is. Okay. Do you have a rebuttal, Mr. Fox? Okay. Rebuttal is limited to 5 minutes.
And can I make one clarification? Because
Sure.
the map that it was pointed to, that was a town of Kernersville conceptual map that staff did a couple of years ago. That blue line is a potential public water line.
Property that he's concerned about, is it currently zoned agriculture, AG, or is it currently zoned residential from the maps you have? And is the buffer required whether or not anything is currently built there?
Yes, a 40-foot, I believe this property is zoned AG. A buffer would be required with the planting requirements. That property slopes drastically down to the creek bottom, then goes back up where the apartment complex is located. And so you, on top of the area where the north point is looking at is a high point, and it would be a minimum of 40-foot buffer with a 15-foot type 2 plantings.
Okay. So, Mr. Ballinger, a buffer would be required 40 feet. He just said they're not, they're moving it. Okay. Mr. Hatling, did I miss any of Mr. Ballinger's questions?
No.
Okay. Do you have any other comments to address Mr. Ballinger's concerns?
No, I'm assuming Chris might address the water line.
Okay. Thank you. All right. There's a 5-minute rebuttal. Please proceed.
Yeah, so in regards to the improvements that Ms. Gray spoke about, and I would just say, you know, our culture is very much built on promises made, promises kept. So, you know, I want everyone to understand that what we said we would do here tonight, we absolutely 100% will do. And, you know, and regarding the neighborhood, I didn't bring this up in my initial presentation, but you know, as we met with the neighbors, we noticed that the streets were in very poor shape. We have agreed to resurface and rebuild those roads in that neighborhood. And it's our understanding that that's going to cost approximately $300,000 to $350,000 to do so, and we've committed to doing that. So one way or another, we'll figure out how to get that accomplished, but we're committing to resurfacing the roads. You know, there's a culvert that we'll continue to dialogue with NCDOT about and see if there's ways that we can leverage funds there to be able to get that culvert fixed for the neighborhood as well. So I just wanted to point that out. And in regard to stormwater management and and I don't know if you can pull our presentation back up, Jeff, sorry, but you know, I think one of the slides kind of shows, you know, where we changed the ridge line. Well, we kind of also show some arrows of how we intend to handle our stormwater management from our park, especially at the south end. And, you know, I think what's important there is that, you know, we'll grade our site to be able to, if you can just slide up, I can point it out.
Can you stop this time while we have adjustments?
Yeah, and so what you can see is, you know, the dashed line is the outline of the building and that area that we're developing. And what we're doing here is we're going to redirect all the stormwater that would normally have just come to the south. We want to keep those trees in that corner, and so we're gonna basically pipe and run that stormwater both around the north end of the building and the south end of the building to get into these detention basins at the southeast corner, and then up into the channel at the northeast corner as well of that building. So you can see at the southeast corner that we're running that stormwater into that detention basin. We'll detain it there and then slowly discharge that into the major creek to the east. So it will not run across our south property line. And so we'll contain our stormwater on our site. And then regarding the utility extensions, I think we're coming up with a solution to, we would not need to go across that property in order to get water or sanitary sewer. So no issues there either. I think I covered all the points that were made. So
Thank you. Ms. Gray or Mr. Ballinger, do you have anything? Okay, thank you. Okay. All right, so the opponents do not wish to do a rebuttal. So I'll declare the public hearing closed. I appreciate everyone's good questions and good thoughtful consideration of talking with each other as you all were going through the planning board process and this public hearing process. A lot of good questions tonight. Appreciate your involvement. All right, so does the Board of Aldermen have questions of anyone in this room?
A little bit more on the street improvements. What streets do you see that need improvement? Is this just Wick Station Lane, or is this other streets in the neighborhood? My microphone wasn't on. Tell me more about what streets you see that you would take responsibility for improving. Obviously, your main line in is Witt Station Lane, but I know I've driven the neighborhoods and I see the condition of the other roads.
yeah, yeah. So with respect to the improvements that we would need to do to support our development, it would really be Witt Station Lane. So at that intersection of Macy Grove and Witt Station, and Macy Grove has turn lanes available for the traffic that would come in and out of our industrial park. But at Witt Station, that right now it's a 2-lane road at that intersection. So our traffic study recommended that be a 3-lane road at that intersection. So we'll go ahead and do the widening that we need to do in order to have 2 outbound lanes and 1 inbound lane at that location. So that's relative to the mitigation of traffic, on the surrounding road network relative to our project site. In addition to that, not subject to, our project's impact whatsoever, is that we happen to drive up those streets to have some meetings with the neighborhood, and the roads were in horrible shape. And so
I think at this point, Madam Mayor, I think I would ask the speaker to cut that off, as I don't think it proper for the board's consideration if it's outside the area of the potential rezoning.
Bruce, do you have any questions of Mr. Wolf?
No.
Okay.
One other question, just on, I see you diverting the water to the east side of the property. Can that stream handle the additional flow of water? Because you'll obviously have more impervious surface.
That's right. And so we conducted our stormwater study. So that's why you see the detention basins around. So the stormwater will go in there, be detained, and then slowly be discharged to that creek. So ultimately, that water, there's a confluence of where that stormwater would normally have gone anyway. And so that's really why we're okay with shifting some of those drainage areas and pushing it over there now, because we can over detain for some of it. And then what that creek really sees is very similar to what it sees today in a greenfield situation after post-development.
And there's still 6 detention ponds on the property.
I believe
That's what the plan
correct.
showed me earlier.
I believe that's correct.
Okay.
If anything, I think we want to save those trees at the southwest corner of Building 1. So we may have made a couple other detention basins just bigger to pick that volume up. So it's the same amount of stormwater detention volume across the park as what we originally showed.
Thank you. The public hearing's closed. Does anyone else have any questions? Mr. Wolf, do you have any other advice for the board?
No, ma'am.
Thank you.
No.
All right, do I have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve 1C for rezoning.
Could you double check that your mic is on?
Yes, ma'am. I'd like to make a motion for approval.
Okay. Jeff, do you want to put the, if you could please put the recommended motion? Is that your motion?
Yes, ma'am. Staff recommendation approval.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Fulton. I have a second by Alderman Kenny Cruz. All in favor?
I'm in favor, but I'd like to make a comment.
Yes. But did you just vote in favor?
Yes.
Okay. So it's unanimously in favor, and I'll recognize Chris Thompson.
I would like to make a comment that my decision is not based on what the developer is saying he's going to do with the roads. That's not part of what our decision-making process is to approve this or not approve it tonight. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, anything further on this? When do you expect to begin?
Later this fall, late October.
Okay. So if you didn't hear, he said late October. And also, did the DOT approve the traffic light where you were requesting it?
They did not. So that is one other thing that I would just say. We want traffic to work for long term, and so we continue to monitor that. That has to meet warrants in order to put a traffic signal in. We will continue to monitor that. As if it meets warrants, we would pull the trigger of the traffic signal if we want more.
Please feel free to come back to the Board of Aldermen if you would like to ask for our support for a traffic light there. I thought that was a very good idea, but it is very difficult to get a traffic light where common sense would have you put one with the DOT's requirements. Thank you. All right, anything further on this case? Again, appreciate everyone's time and consideration. We'll move on to speakers from the floor. Agenda item 2A. I have Allison Walls signed up to speak. And if the microphone doesn't have a green ring on it, just push the button.
It's green.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
If
I
you
want-
could restate your name and address for the record. And is Robert Everhart speaking today?
No, I'm going to speak on both of our behalf.
Okay.
Okay. And first of all, I want to say my name is Allison Walls, and I live at 1190 Reynolds Price Drive. That is the Author Subdivision neighborhood. I have lived there 4 years, and Robert Everhart, he is the owner, which he's here with me tonight. He's lived there 24 years. My concern is I want to first of all thank you, Mayor, and Curtis Swisher, the town manager. I want to say thank you for your concern, and anyone else that's sitting in, the aldermans and everyone. When I called the town, and also Jenny Fulton, thank you so much. But what my concern is tonight is the neighbor directly behind us. We have a privacy fence, and I also have pictures to show too. I don't know these neighbors. I've not got to know them. I've spoken to them, but the situation is that they've had overgrown yards, and the inspector's been out there, and she's worked with him some, and he's got a lot of junk, and things in his yard that people usually don't have. He has 2 old dressers. He has wood stacked up that is, and it's just a mess back there, and I have pictures. But anyway, my concern is the inspector came out Friday, and her name is Marcy. She was super nice, and she told me and Robert, she said, Allison, she said, I'm going to work on this. And of course, with a holiday, I understand it was Friday. I spoke to Mike this morning, which is her boss, and he told me the concern of mine is they have rats, and I have them in these pictures that I've off my cell phone, and I went and I printed them off, and I have them circled. And may I step forward and show you?
Sure, if you'll hand it to Mr. Swisher, he'll distribute it to us.
Here's the wood that's stacked back there. There's more stuff in the back, causes rats. The sad thing also is they have a dog back there. That's and I'm going to address this again with the animal control. That's not taken care of. Thank you, sir. But my concern tonight, let me get back over here. My concern tonight, when I spoke to Mike this morning, and Robert and I both listened in on the speakerphone of our cell phones, he said there was nothing he could do about the rats. And I didn't argue with him, and I was upset. Anyone would. We have grandchildren that come, they go out in the backyard. There's 2 little girls that live across the street. They play out in the yard. It's never cleaned up. He told me, he said, we're going to give him 10 days to clean it up. If he don't, then we'll send someone out there to clean it up. The dressers and the junk. They're not going to touch the wood pile. Rats go around the wood pile. And they live off of wood. They live off of stuff. They eat up the dog houses back there. He's got 2 dog houses back there that they've eaten off of. I sat and watched the rats through my privacy fence last week. I'm not a nosy neighbor. I'm a very busy lady. Very busy. But their dog kept barking. I went back there to see what was going on. And the dog was hungry. So I fed the dog. And over to the side, then the dog food is sitting there that they put out that the rats are eating. And the rats are going in and out of the dog houses. So I got researching. I looked up online, and rats will multiply. They'll have, they can have 10 to 12 pups per year, 6 times. 6 times. That's a lot. That's a lot. So when the inspector spoke to Mr. Greer, his name is Mr. James Greer, his wife's name's Hope Greer, at 1354, he said he knew he had 1 rat back there. That's what he told the inspector. She told me. He also made the comment that he knew who had reported him, and they better watch out. I consider that a threat. He was out in his yard yesterday, make a long story short, and I spoke to him. Hi, how are y'all doing? He said, we're fine. Thank you. It's just a problem with the rats. I mean, it's a health problem. We have enough folks to go worry about with this COVID. We really do. What's in the air? Rats carry, I've done my research, they carry 5 different diseases. A human or a dog can catch it. It's not fair. It's not fair to us. We pay good tax money to the town of Kernersville. I'm not fussing at anyone tonight. I'm just expressing my feelings because I've been upset. We work hard. We've gotten out and delivered groceries for Walmart. Robert owns a dog sitting business for 15 years after he retired from rentals. I'm an author. I represent myself in the community through Sam's Club and Barnes and Nobles. Do I want to live where I don't feel comfortable going in my backyard to cook out or to let my 2 dogs out. What can be done about the rats?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Hatling, does the health department still answer calls about rats? I knew they had cut back on some of that program.
Yeah, I'm Jeff Hatling. I'm the Community Development Director. Mike and Marcy are within my department. Just looking at these pictures, the stacked wood, and then of course the pictures we're looking at.
Could I interject something, Mayor, that might,
Yes, Mr. Wolf.
and I need Jeff's guidance on this, but I was contacted the other day, and I believe this is the matter, that the individual who is allegedly allowing the rats and other things out there, I believe he lives out of town. Is that not correct, Jeff? That's a different case. So they're all in town in this one. Okay, thank you, Mayor.
The Allison is on Reynolds Price, so this would be backed up to where she lives.
But Mayor, yes, I could follow up with this, and also, I think Marcy documented it well also, so we'll continue to follow up with it.
Thank you. And so Marcy and Mike both work with Jeff Hatling. So continue to follow up with Marcy and Mike, and Mr. Hatling has the photographs and he'll follow up with you.
Okay, can I say one last thing?
Sure, go ahead.
I spoke with Commissioner Dave Flower,
Okay.
and he gave me some names to contact. He told me also that they'll know that I had spoken with him today. And it's going to be taken care of soon because, there's not like one rat back here. I'm going to give y'all a chance. I mean, that's what I'm upset about. It's a family. They've nested in those dressers. They're going into the doghouse. The dog can't go in the doghouse, either one of them. You see the pictures I've shown. I'm telling you, it's bad. They have chewed down at the bottom of our privacy fence, a place where they got in our yard. Our dog killed 2 rats in our yard. And she's an inside dog. I took her to the vet after that to make sure she was okay. Something has got to be done. I mean, we can't just talk about it. There's children close by. If a rat bites a child, it's going to be bad.
Ms. Walls, something is being done about it.
Right?
Marcy contacted you back when you contacted the department. Mr. Hatling's going to follow up with Marcy and with Mike and with the other possible enforcement mechanisms. Our town doesn't have an animal control or a health department. We work with the county, who you've correctly identified. Commissioner Dave Plyler is the chair of the Forsyth County Board of Commissioners. So the departments that he is over may interact with the town of Kernersville in the enforcement of this. But Mr. Hatling has your photographs. Is it all right for him to keep those? Okay, and so you can call him tomorrow morning if you'd like and get more information.
Okay, I'm sorry if I sound like I'm upset because I am upset. I mean, it's not my problem. I shouldn't have to take care of the neighbor's problems, but I'm addressing it to y'all because y'all are the town who runs the town.
I hate to interrupt you, but there's a lot of people who have concerns that have things on the agenda tonight, and we want to be fair to them and not keep them so late tonight. Mr. Hatling? We appreciate you bringing your concern, and they will follow up with you. Okay. All right. Any other speakers from the floor? All right, we'll move on then to item 2B, presentation of the annual report on the implementation of Onward Kernersville.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Implementation Committee for Onward Kernersville met last Thursday, September 2nd, for the first time. 13 of the 20 committee members were present and 2 participated by phone, and we're very grateful to the IT department for their technical support. Ahead of the meeting, staff provided recommendations on the goals and action items as a jumping off point, but there was a lot of discussion by the committee. We anticipate between now and the November meeting, which will be their next meeting, working committees will be formed and begin meeting to discuss taking concrete action steps.
Okay, are there any questions? All right, thank you. All right, item C is consideration of a resolution authorizing acceptance of a grant award from the Carolina Panthers Charities. Mr. Swisher?
Madam Mayor, I covered this briefly at the briefing. What it is an award, as it says, from the Carolina Panthers Charities Administration. It is for our flag football league that Parks and Rec is proposing for individuals with disabilities. The grant's $3,200. Does not require a match on behalf of the town. I think the question was asked when the league would begin play. They will begin play September the 9th. Season runs from September the 9th through October the 28th. So looking forward to it. I think we just did one for soccer. Is that correct, Ernie? Didn't we just do a similar league with soccer? Yeah. So following up on soccer, now doing one with football.
Okay, are there any questions? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I have a motion for approval from Alderman Bruce Boyer. Do I have a second? Second from Alderman Thompson. All those in favor? It's unanimous. All right, item D is consideration of a resolution authorizing an application for funding from the Governor's Highway Safety Program. Mr. Swisher?
Madam Mayor and Board, as I said at the board meeting, this is actually year 11 or 12 of this resolution. It has went on longer than we anticipated, which is good. This helps fund 2 positions in the police department. The grant is $38,670.90. We already have those 2 positions in the budget, and we budgeted for those, so this grant would help offset some of the costs of those 2 positions.
Okay, are there any questions or do I have a motion? Motion to approve by Alderman Chris Thompson, second by Alderman Cruz. All those in favor? It's unanimous. All right, item E is consideration of a resolution of support for a school justice partnership. Mr. Swisher?
Chief Summers covered this in detail at the briefing. I'll just briefly refresh the board's memory on what this is. It is a partnership, as it says, it's a resolution of support for a school justice partnership. It includes Winston-Salem Police Department, Sheriff's Department, Kernersville Police Department. And basically what it is it is a 10-step approach aimed at reducing the number of suspensions, expulsions, and referrals to law enforcement in schools for minor misconduct and disciplinary actions. It changes some of the approach on how that is handled. Sometimes with minor misconduct, law enforcement becomes involved and they're suspended or expelled. So it's what that's doing is it's kind of shifting the way in which that is approached and the way it's handled at the school level. Some of that disciplinary action will now be done mainly at the school level without law enforcement being involved in it. So it's been supported by those entities that I just mentioned. Staff's recommending support for it as well here in Kernersville.
Are there any questions? Do I have a motion? Motion by Alderman Joe Penix. Do I have a second? Second by Mayor Pro Tem Fulton. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Keith, did you get the motion with my mask on?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we passed that. So we are to item F, consideration of an interlocal agreement with Forsyth County for architectural survey.
Madam Mayor and Board, as I said at the briefing, this is the survey. We have the current book there as you go into the admin area. This is to update that book. It's countywide. Kernersville has agreed to participate in that. Our participation for fiscal year 21-22 is $3,750. We have that money in the budget. I checked on that. It was budgeted for this year. I think there's a couple more years left in that. And in the end, when that book is complete, we will receive, I think, 300 publications of that as well. So, it's updating them. I think they changed the year, basically what's considered historical. That year changed. So they'll go back and pick up some more structures that were not in the original publication will be in the new one. So looking forward to it being complete. As I said, it's started several years ago, probably 3 years ago. I think 1 year the grant funding was not received for whatever reason. So that's delayed it about a year, but they've picked back up now and are looking forward to completing that. I think it's in 2 years.
Okay, do I have a motion? Motion by Alderman Thompson.
Second.
I have a second by Alderman Boyer. All those in favor? It's unanimous. All right, item G is consideration of an ordinance amending traffic schedule 2 of chapter 9 of the Code of Ordinances to add all Weldon alleys to the list 10-mile speed zone. And our next item would be H, consideration of an ordinance to amend traffic schedule 4 of chapter 9 of the Code of Ordinances to add all Weldon alleys to the schedule no parking anytime. As you're aware, Weldon is a subdivision in Kernersville. Mr. Swisher?
Madam Mayor and Board, Weldon has been under development. They now have several homes in the area. The alleys are not currently marked as 10 miles per hour. I don't know if they even have a speed limit to them yet, and they do not have a no parking. We're recommending both of those take place for the alleys there in Weldon.
Okay, we'll first vote on item J, G, which is the alleys. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I have a motion by Alderman Boyer and a second by Alderman Thompson. All those in favor? It's unanimous. All right, item H is the no parking anytime. Do I have a motion? Motion by Alderman Thompson.
I'll second.
Second by Alderman Boyer. All those in favor? It's unanimous. All right, item I is consideration of a resolution awarding a financing contract for the purchase of equipment. Mr. Swisher?
Madam Mayor, this is for the equipment that was approved in the budget, with the exception of one piece of equipment, and that is the Bobcat that the board, for Parks and Recreation, that the board agreed to add. That's what we did to cover the cost of that Bobcat, or the payment on that Bobcat, was we adjusted some line items in Ernie's budget to make up for that. I've spoken, I think, to all of you today. Instead of the Bobcat, we need to purchase 2 tractors for Parks and Recreation. It will be the same amount as the Bobcat. As what's happened is in the last week, literally last week, we have 2 tractors in Parks and Recreation. One's a 2007, one's a 2011. The transmission in both of those tractors came out the same week. The 2011 is a bigger tractor. It's about $8,000 to fix that transmission, somewhere between $8,000 and $10,000. The smaller tractor is a 2007. I think to fix that transmission is somewhere between $5,000 and $7,000. So we're getting up to about what the tractors are worth. If they weren't broken, I think the big one's worth about $15,000 if it's in good shape. Obviously, ours is not in good shape. Small tractors worth somewhere around $7,000 to $10,000 if it's in good shape. Again, ours obviously is not in good shape since it will not run. We've contacted the dealer about renting a tractor if we were to fix ours. We would rent one. I think it is about $7,000 to rent the large tractor for 2 months, and $5,000 to rent a small one. And we don't know if we can get it fixed in 2 months. So really, it's time to replace those. Spoken to all of you, you were fine with substituting 2 tractors for the Bobcat. The Bobcat had some specific uses that we need it for. We will most likely be requesting that Bobcat in the budget next year, but right now the priority is those 2 tractors. Until they broke, they weren't the priority, but now they are. So with that aside, we'll just substitute the 2 tractors in there on the back sheet of that memo. But we have an interest rate for the equipment in there. It's $1.236 million in equipment, 5-year term at an interest rate of 0.77%. And the fire truck is on a 10-year term, $850,000 with an interest rate of 1.21%. Both of those are with Bank of America. So staff is recommending approval of the financing contract that you have in your packet. It's a resolution executing that contract with Bank of America.
Any questions? Do I have a motion?
I do have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
So the Bobcat, we're going to do 2 tractors for $105,000?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so when will all this be purchased? I read the resolution. It said effective immediately.
Yeah,
Have we bought anything yet?
we have not, no,
Okay.
because the loans, we have
Okay.
not signed the loan. When y'all approve this tonight, we will get with the bank and hopefully get the loan next week, and then we
Okay.
can start purchasing the equipment.
So then that leads to my other question. So the cameras for the security system, when will they come in? Or, when do you think they'll be installed? For live streaming the cameras? First thing
Just
on the
as-
list?
As soon as we can get them.
Okay.
I mean, a lot of it will be dependent upon how soon we can get it. Once we get the loan approved, then we can order them, and it's just up to, it's
Supply.
up to whether or not they're in stock
Okay.
and whether or not they have them in supply. We don't know that, back to the tractors, we don't know that we'll be able to get 2 tractors. We feel pretty sure we can get 1, but we don't know that we'll be able to get 2. But as soon as we can get it in, as soon as the loan's approved and we can get it in, we'll get them installed.
Okay, and can we just update our equipment description to show the 2 tractors? So when we go back and if we're looking, we can locate it
Yeah, we
versus
can,
Bobcat,
yeah, we'll update that. Yes,
please.
ma'am.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Curtis.
All right, are there further questions? Do I have a motion? Motion by Alderman Penix for approval. Do I have a second? Second by Alderman Boyer. All those in favor? It's unanimous. All right, item J is consideration of an ordinance for budget amendment number 2.
Madam Mayor and Board, this is a fairly short budget amendment. We put it in here mainly to cover item number 2 that you see there. The increase in the fire department expenditures for $160,000 to cover the purchase of a reserve fire rescue ladder truck. The other 3 items in there, item 1, item 3, and item 4. Item 1 being the governing body expenditures for $15,000 to cover the sister city commission expenses to transport a donated fire truck to El Salvador. That has offsetting revenue, as you'll see in number 2 in the revenues. You have the grant from the Foundation for the Carolinas of $3,200 in expenditures. It also has offsetting revenue. And we have increase in engineering department for $370,000 to cover design and construction expenses for the sewer project on Kernersville Medical Parkway. And that has offsetting revenues. So the only expenditure out of this is the $160,000 that was approved for the reserve ladder truck.
Okay, are there any questions?
We're donating a fire or a fire truck?
Well,
We need to add that.
might a little bit of both. We'll test the fire truck out with that fire.
No questions. I'll move that we approve this.
Okay. Motion by Alderman Boyer, second. Second by Alderman Penix. All in favor? It's unanimous. So we've been going for quite a while. Would anyone like to take a break? How about we take a brief recess? We'll stand in recess. Welcome back to the regular meeting of the Kernersville Board of Aldermen. We left at item 2K, discussion regarding funding for the new Parks and Recreation building. Mr. Swisher?
Madam Mayor and Board, as you know, the Parks and Recreation building was approved for funding in fiscal year 21-22. I think it was approved at about $12.1 million, which is the projected estimated construction cost and everything back in May of 2020, I believe. You all have approved an architect, CPL, and also a contractor, builder, which was Samet. We've worked with Samet and CPL to determine the cost of that building. Have a short presentation here. Jeff, can you go back to, is that the first slide in line? Go to the one where it shows what it looks like real quick. There you go. That is the conceptual design of the building. That is what you see there is that's the side of the building. The front there is where the little awning comes out. That will be facing Ivy Redmond Park. The back and the side of the building will be along Shields Road. As you remember, there's the front of it. That's what you will see if you're coming up Beeson Road from Ivy Redmond Park. And then the back will be brick, of course, along the side and the back. As you know, we made a recommendation and the board approved relocating that building. Initially, it was to be down near the baseball fields where the current dog park is. It will now be basically where the sign is for Ivy Redmond Park, right there along Shields Road. Anyways, what we're here to discuss tonight is, as you can imagine, the cost of construction has went up and we can no longer build the building for the $12.1 million. Jeff, you'll go back to the first slide. That is the one story. We have adjusted the size of the building to one story, 43,138 square feet. Jeff, you'll go to show the two story. There's a two story right there, which is what it initially was. What the initial design was, it's 51,763 square feet. The main difference, Jeff, you'll click the next slide. The main difference is right there on level 2. If we do the one story, we will not have, it'll still look like you have the upper story, but on that second story, you won't have the walking track. That was down around the competition court. The one to your right, you got 2 courts and then one by itself. The walking track was around that. We lose the walking track. Upstairs, we lose some staff offices and we lose a medium classroom. It's what we do retain in the smaller version of this building is we retain the competition court, which is the one there on the right. Jeff, you'll go back to the one that shows the one story. There you go. We retain the competition court. We retain basically 3 high school regulation basketball courts, 6 regulation volleyball courts, an elevated stage, staff offices, large fitness classroom, small fitness classroom, dividable multi-purpose room, concessions, catering, teaching kitchen, and a large classroom. So that is all that was in the 2-story. We retain that, and again, what we lose is that space that would have been in the upper part of the 2-story. Talked to Ernie as late as today. We are recommending to the board, because of cost, doing the 1-story and not the 2. Jeff, you'll flip over to the slide that has the cost. For those of you that can't see that, and I'm one of them, because I can't see that far, that's why I've got a printed copy. This is added with some new arithmetic. Didn't come from me, it came from the architect. You'll see total construction cost on the bottom, but you have to add going up. So the total cost is at the top. The total cost of the 1-story building is $14,747,566. That is roughly $2.7 million more than what was budgeted for. The 2-story building, which is what we initially proposed, is now $16,759,359 for a total of about $4.7 million more. So it went up about 38.5%, which is not out of line with what we've seen construction going up. So we are recommending, and we'll be glad to do either one of them. We hope the board chooses one of them. We're recommending doing the one-story building. And I know that the big question is how you're going to pay for that. There are several different options. We've not went out and gotten the loan yet for this building. The initial loan for the $11.3 million is in the budget. So we would go out and borrow a total of, if you borrow all of the extra $2.7 million, you just said, we're going to borrow all of the 2.7, not take any money out to pay for it. Your payments would be about $206,000 a year more than what was budgeted. I wouldn't really recommend doing that. Money's cheap. That's 25 years at 3.75% interest. So what I would recommend doing is taking out a loan for either 1.7 million or a loan for 1 million, and then taking the rest out. You'll probably ask me if you finance 1 million, where are you going to get to 1.7 million? I probably should reverse these on the agenda, but we've got some revenue, some American Rescue Plan funds, stimulus funds that are eligible to be used for this that I'll cover in just a minute. But we could take $1.7 million from those funds and finance $1 million more than what we initially budgeted. And your payments would be about $76,000 a year more. Now, if you got real, decide you wanted to do the bigger building, 51,000 square feet, and you wanted to finance the $4.7 million difference in its entirety, you're looking at about $360,000 a year more in payments. If you said, I want to pay $1.7 million down and finance $3 million, you're looking at about $230,000 a year difference. So our recommendation again is to do the smaller building because we get what we need. And I would recommend you either take $1 million out from your stimulus funds, or you take 1.7 million out from your stimulus funds and finance the rest. Or you can finance all of it, whichever one the board chooses, or you can simply say, we're not going to build the building. I wouldn't recommend doing that simply because it's in the budget. The money's in there. It's, when you look at it on a big scale over a 25-year period, it's not going to cost you significant amount more to go ahead and do the building now. We did ask the Summit when they thought that construction costs may come down. He said, the cost of materials might come down, certain materials, but certain materials might go up. So it's kind of a balancing act. If it gets approved tonight, it would probably be about March before we could start the building. That would be the grading. We still have to go through the loan process. We got to go through the LGC on this. We'd have to go through the LGC, get approval from them, finalize our construction bids. All of that would take you probably into about December or January, maybe December, best shot be December. But you wouldn't start anything anyway in January, February because of the weather. You delay it a month or two, whatever, that just delays it that much further back. So we would like to have it, obviously have the board approve it, one of the options tonight, so that we can start that process of, getting the loan package together, putting it out to bid to different banks, getting those bids in, and going to the LGC. So the cost is not going to change, whether it's, this month or next month. You would probably have to wait at least 6 months, if not a year, for the cost to come down significantly. Be glad to answer any questions. And again, Ernie's here. He can address it from his standpoint as to whether or not it still meets the needs of Parks and Rec. I think it does. Again, it's a 43,000 square foot building. You're losing the walking track, but we talked about it. the use that the walking track would generate, I mean, it's, you know, during the day when there's no one using the courts, they can simply walk around the outside of the courts. I mean, it just wouldn't be a designated track there for them to use. The focus of the building was not really the walking track anyway. Obviously, it was the courts, the stage, the large meeting rooms. That brings me to another point. This does not change the size of the meeting room. So in other words, it's still big enough to host an event where you've got you can have 600 people, 500 to 600 people sitting down at a table, eating dinner at an event. You can still do that. That was one thing that we told them that we didn't feel like we could compromise would be the size of the big room to host however many people. Sitting down without dinner, if you don't have the 8-foot table in there, if you just have chairs in there, we think probably somewhere around 900 to 1,000 people. So be glad to answer any questions. I know that kind of the stimulus funding's on down the agenda, but I can tell you that there is enough money that from the stimulus funding that we're eligible to spend that is not restricted, that we could take $1.7 million from that and finance the other $1 million if you choose to.
Can the walking track be added at a later date?
There is a phase 2 to the building, where the building will be built and designed in a way that the phase 2, at some point in time, when we add that phase 2, it will just kind of blend in with the rest of the building. It's possible we could add it at that time. I don't know, honestly, because we've really not asked, but knowing how it's designed, I think you probably could in phase 2, but I don't know, 100% don't know the answer for sure.
This is the first time I'm seeing these numbers, and it's not attached to our agenda. So can we get that attached to the agenda? Can we get a hold of the numbers? Because, I'm a numbers person. I want to look at it. I understand exactly with building costs and everything, but this is, a request of spending what, 2.7 million, $1 million on, and I've seen this in the last 5 minutes. So I would like to get the numbers and do a little homework on it. I know we've approved the building. I'm all for the Parks and Rec building. But that's a lot of money to make a quick decision without having numbers in front of me. Thank you.
So I can do that. The reason it wasn't attached, it was a pretty short presentation. I didn't want to attach it without any kind of logic behind it. So that's why I presented it. I'll be glad to attach it now that I've presented it to you and send you the numbers.
Yeah, I just think it's important to have it attached, let people be able to look at it and review it. I'm comfortable voting on it next month. If we vote on it now, I can't support that. Thank you.
Do you need a decision this quickly?
It's probably the only thing that will change is to push it back 1 month. Just push everything back. And again, if we're looking at probably at best December, they wouldn't start construction. So if you do it next month, they'd push it back to January. They're still not going to start construction. So I don't think tonight is a do or die situation on it.
I'm in agreement with Alderman Fulton. I'd like to go over this myself mentally, but B, I'd also like to hear about the stimulus funds, which I know you said you're going to talk about that next, obviously, on the agenda. So I guess that's my point.
And I also agree with Alderman Fulton. I'd like to see the sketch of the building and the numbers. I can't read it from here, and I've got another piece of glass to even look through. So I'm not opposed to it at all. I just would like to see it close up if I could.
Yep, that's fine. We'll put it, if you want to continue it, and we'll put it back on the agenda next month and attach this to it next month, since you have the reason and the logic behind it. So you can have that, and I'll send out the numbers on the financing as well for that proposal.
Perfect, thank you.
Do I have a motion to continue this matter to the next month's meeting?
Yes, I'd like to make that motion to continue.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem Fulton. Do I have a second? Second by Alderman Joe Penix. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Curtis, can you also include the floor plans and the square footage changes?
Yeah.
And so that it'll all be together, could you also include, Ernie, the the community responses or the plan relative to the areas that are recommended for removal to meet that lower price point?
Make one comment.
Or the plan, just so we have it all together, so people don't have to go searching for the rec plan from 6 months ago to line it up. So everything is right there where you can access it. Mr. Thompson?
I'd just like to add a comment. I don't have to hear it right now, but I'd like to know from Ernie. I mean, I'm not opposed to the 2-story building if we see that as much as we're growing as far as the Parks and Rec department goes, if we have a chance to do something all at one time now, is it a lot of money? Yes, I understand that is, but I'd just like to get his take on what are we losing, what are we gaining, is it worth doing now or not? So I guess at the next meeting. Does that make sense?
The amenities that were designed in it were designed in response to comments by the community and the community input process. So it would be nice to have the comments relating to indoor places to walk or the need for that medium-sized classroom when we're considering what the best course of action is to take.
Okay, so one more
Ernie,
time.
go ahead.
One more time, you want to
So
know
again,
the full both phases versus single phase?
Well, yeah, and what you would feel is the best way to go. I know from a construction standpoint, if we're only talking about, and I know that's a lot of money, don't get me wrong, with $3, $4, $5 million, and we're in the middle of this process now, and we're doing a 1-story instead of a 2-story. 5-10 years down the road, are we going to look back and go, gosh, we should have spent that extra money because construction costs then are through the roof even more, and we should have done it all at one time. We're having to double back and try to figure out what we're going to do. Again, if you're talking about a walking track, staff, offices, a meeting room, I think is what the other item I saw on there.
So in terms of the phase one gives us most of the traditional recreation space you think about: classrooms, multi-purpose rooms, offices, those type of things. So we lose a classroom in the single phase or single floor plan versus the second. And I believe we lose some offices. So you're not losing value based one single floor versus a double floor in terms of phase one. But when you look at the terms of sports tourism, economic stimulus, drawing power, then if we're talking about single phase versus doing the full-fledged footprint, then you have greater value doing both phases in one shot, because the worst thing you can do is say, man, I wish you would have done all 6 courts versus doing 3 courts. And then you don't know what the economic picture is going to be back at that time. And then you don't want to look back and say, shoot, wish we would have done all 6. You're looking at the tournament, the draw that you might have, so in terms of value based in that realm, then I would say do it all in one shot. But it all depends on, the financial picture, how much stimulus you can use for it, how's that fit in, that kind of stuff. But if it was up to me and then magic wand, I would do both phases of one because you have greater value in that sense.
That's the way I feel about it, Ernie. I feel like, and that's why I wanted to look at it another month, but it's almost like these kids go to college 2 years and they say, well, I'll go back.
Mm-hmm. And you never do.
One day and they never go back. I mean, I think this thing might be all we get. We might never finish the thing. I'd like to, if there's a possibility of doing it, I'd like to do it while we got the excitement out there, and I feel like it just might be put on the back burner.
Right.
That'd be my fear.
Yeah, because I'd hate to do it single phase, thinking, okay, we'll do this double phase, and then you think it's 5 years, and then something else pops up, and then it becomes 10 years, and then something else pops up, and then you do 20 years. And if you look back in the past, we've been talking about a rec center going back on 50 years. So it's 50 years before we got to this point. You hate to do that and start a sports tourism draw and then not be able to carry through with it. So in terms of value, full footprint is the best way to go, but it all comes down to dollars and cents too.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Yeah, I'd like to, if there's any possible way, while we've got the excitement and gosh, we've been waiting on this thing for decades. So let's think about it.
Okay. Any more questions before I go there?
Okay, so we've continued it to next month. We've talked about the items we'd like to have available for consideration in the decision. Anything further on the Parks and Recreation building? All right, we are moving on then to item 2L, discussion regarding overhead signage on South Main Street.
Madam Mayor, this was brought up about possibly having some overhead signage on South Main Street as you're traveling north, somewhere in the vicinity of Hardee's, right in that area, to alert motorists about which lane they need to be in to go to downtown or to go onto Cherry Street. So Jeff has a picture up. That's about what it would look like. It would not be that long, obviously, because it would only stretch over 2 lanes. Instead of that one's going over, it looks like 3.5, maybe 4 lanes. But it would be a mast arm pole, comes over those 2 lanes there. The 2 lanes that goes straight, is my understanding, to let them know to get into the left lane to go up Cherry Street north, or to stay in the right lane to go north on Main Street. Checked on the cost of these. I think it was around $30,000. Is that correct, Dawn? The town will be responsible for that cost. It is not a decorative mast arm pole. We've talked about it. A decorative mast arm pole would be a little bit out of place down in that area because none of the poles in that area are decorative, similar to what we have in downtown. If you went with decorative, I mean, our best guess on the price is what, about 50 to 60 at least, maybe even more. That pole would probably be, it would look similar to the ones downtown, and it would be out of place. So that's more in line with what's on South Main Street. And again, it wouldn't be that long, but it would be basically what you see over where the first 2 cars are there. That's about how long that mast arm would stretch on South Main. Be glad to answer any questions the board might have regarding that.
I've got a comment to make. That's a lot of money to make Main Street in Kernersville look like Interstate Highway. I don't think we need it. That's my opinion.
I'm like Mr. Penix also. I think the overhead signage, and we're looking at 50 to 60 to even 70,000 if you do all the decorative by the time we get through with it. We're a couple of signs there. And as I've traveled out through there and look at it, most of the South Main traffic is normally local people that do it normally. And most of our out of town traffic is coming in off of 66. And I just can't see that much money there when a couple of signs on the side would probably serve just as well a purpose. And we could use the money that we would put for a sign as repairing the roads that we have that need it now. And I feel like that would be more important to us.
I'm of the opinion that a sign would be nice. Personally, I like being able to fly up on the right side and nobody knows where they're going, and I can slide off to downtown and blow by everybody. But I'm not in favor of that large of a sign. It seems like to me we could have one sign on the right side that designated Main Street and Cherry Street. I think anybody in the left 2 lanes knows where they're going. It just gets a little confusing when you come up and it veers off so quick to the right to go to Main Street, and the ones that are going 1 lane over are going to turn, whether they figured out quick enough time or not. So I'm not opposed to a sign. I just think it needs to be decorative or off to the side so it's not so intrusive as that one is in that picture. That's just my opinion.
I'm just curious, the accidents, Jason. Is that a bad traffic accident area right there in front of Cagney's and people coming over? What do traffic accidents look like there?
Captain Tilly, could you come to the microphone so
sorry.
that Keith can get your remarks? Oh, okay, that'd be fine. Or John can hand you the microphone.
We've had a few really any different than anywhere else. Not a huge concern for us right now.
Okay, good to know. Thank you, Captain. Is the informational sign like Alderman Thompson recommended doable versus spending all that money on a big arm?
I don't know. Dorn can tell you more on that. I don't know.
As you all know, the main thing we have to keep in mind is it's an NCDOT street. So it's their 100% approval. They're just asking us to pay for whatever it is. I don't think they will allow just a sign on the side of the road because it's not capturing your attention like one above. But also, I don't think they're going to approve anything other than something that looks like that, because they sent me that picture and said, this is what we would approve. But the signage, like I think you're talking about a single pole sign with the on the right side of the road. I don't know that they would approve that. I can ask, but I wouldn't put any luck in it. Okay.
Would it help if it's brown and says historic downtown straight ahead? Cherry Street left?
You mean the sign itself?
Yeah, could it be one of those bigger brown signs
That's a possibility.
that
Yes.
says historic downtown straight ahead?
Yes, I can look into that, but I bet they would allow that one.
Okay.
We need a motion to continue this or no?
Do you want to just follow up? I don't know that we need to have it on the agenda. Continued, because we can put it on the agenda new, with however it's situated at the time.
Okay. Okay. And then if you do get information, make sure it's attached to the agenda so people can see it, please. That's perfect.
Okay, anything further on South Main Street signage? All right. Next, we are to item 2M, discussion regarding American Rescue Plan Act funds.
Madam Mayor and Board, you have a memo in your packet from Franz Ader, our Finance Director, to myself, pass along to you about the state and local fiscal recovery funds, better known as American Rescue Plan Act, stimulus money, however you want to cover it. But we received on July 30th of 2021, this year, we received our first installment of our stimulus funds, $3.929 million. We're slated to receive $7.859 million. So we received roughly half of that funding. We will receive the other half, hopefully same time next year, maybe a little bit earlier. So along with that comes a 153-page interim rule that tells you how you can and how you can't spend your money. Keep in mind, I said interim rule because it's not been finalized yet. So I know I've had a lot of calls from different folks in the community. You have as well. Some of you have called me asking how we can spend it. So it's what I'm recommending. For the bulk of that money, we just wait until the final rule is released, and then we go through and see what the new guidelines are and what the new guidance is. That recommendation coming from the North Carolina League of Municipalities, School of Government, different folks around the state are saying, wait and see how you can spend that money in the final rule. I do not know when the final rule will be released. We think it will be sometime this fall, but we're not sure. And I said it applies to primarily all of that money. You are allowed to calculate what your revenue loss was as of December the 30th of 2020 using a formula that they sent out from the Treasury's office. We calculated that revenue loss. Our revenue loss, according to our calculations using their guidelines, is $3.2 million. That money can be used to provide government services in addition, to the funding already allowed by the rule, but it can be used to provide government services as you normally provide. So what that means is way we interpret it, and we've asked and been told, yes, you can do that. That $3.2 million can be used about however the board chooses to use it, as long as it is a government service that you would normally provide. Now, you can't go out here and get into a business that you're not normally in. I think Franz used an analogy today. We can't go out and buy a sweepstakes business and say we're now in the sweepstakes business. We can't do that with it. But you can use it how you choose. Like I say, as long as it's a service that the board provides. That's where I got the $1.7 million to use toward the funding of the recreation center, the cost overruns on that. You could choose to use all $3.2 million of it toward that. I don't want to break the bank on it and use all of it because there might be some more uses for that funding down the road. Again, so it's what you've got is you have $3.2 million that you can use right now, how you choose to use it. The other roughly 4.6 million has a lot of restrictions with it. And I can tell you that about every question I've gotten, can we do this with it? Can we do that with it? Most of them have been no, not really. And the ones that have not been no, not really have been I don't know. Let me check. Catch to that is I could give that rule and the guidelines to 10 people and get 10 different answers on whether you could or couldn't spend it in that fashion. So we're hoping that the new guidelines coming out will clarify that some, and that will only apply to the $4.2 million. So for that $4.2 million, we have until December 31st of 2024 to obligate the funds. It means you got to tell them what you're going to spend it on. And you've got until December 31st, 2026 to expend those funds. We will calculate our revenue loss again through December 31st of 2023. So we'll do it for 3 more years. We had a tax revaluation this year, so I don't anticipate there being a revenue loss or not as great a revenue loss. So what I'm asking, kind of what I'm telling you tonight is you've got $3.2 million that you can go in and kind of do what you want to with it. And you've got $4.6 million that I'm saying you probably need to wait on. And I would even wait a little bit on the 3.2 million as opposed to coming up with 50 different projects. If you choose to do that, then certainly if we can get them all fitted in that amount of money, we could spend that. But definitely on the 4.6 million, I would recommend waiting. And on the 3.2 million, if you're going to spend part of it on a rec center, all of it on a rec center, however you want to do that, I would at least recommend waiting until you make that decision if you anticipate spending some of it on the rec center. So that's where we are with the stimulus funds. I wanted to give you the update on that. I'll update you just as soon as the final rule comes out as to how we can spend that. We are looking at some different options, some different ways of spending the money, how it's allowed. Had Jeff look up the qualified census tracts, see what we can do in there. You've got a little more flexibility in how you spend your money in those areas. So we're looking at all different ways of how we can allocate that money. But we know the 3.2 million, we can spend it without a lot of restrictions compared to the other money. So be glad to answer any questions. You know, again, it's kind of, in our opinion, probably a wait and see where we are when we get the final ruling. If something comes up and you want to spend that 3.2 million, such as on the rec center, whatever, if something else you want to spend it on, then certainly, I think you could do that. And I don't think there's any action to be taken tonight unless you say, hey, I want to spend $3.2 million on X, then of course you need to take action to vote to do that. But short of that, I don't think there's any action that needs to be taken by the board.
Any questions or comments?
I just have a question. I know we don't get $3.9 million every day brought in, but we got it July 30th. And we had a meeting August 4th. So, and we're learning about it in the September meeting. So my question is there a procedure or policy we should look at to notify people, maybe more, you know, not take 30 days to get notified? I'm just curious. Okay. I mean, I do think it's important, and thank you for putting it on the budget amendment, and I saw that, but I've already been questioned, why did it take us 30 days to be notified? That money came in. So, and I asked Curtis, and he was very honest. He said, Jenny, I just hadn't looked yet. And so then I was like, well, maybe we should address that just with an email or just something, because I know it's got to come in front of the board to be spent or what you're going to do with it. But just something to consider, please. Thank you.
Okay. Anything further on this? All right, we will move on to the consent agenda. I know Alderman Boyer had an item to remove. Which item would you like to remove, Bruce?
I'd like to remove 3B, please.
Okay. We'll remove item 3B and consider it in a few moments. Is there anyone else who'd like to remove an item from the consent agenda? Anyone on the Board of Aldermen? Any staff? Any residents in attendance? All right, seeing none, do I have a motion for approval of items 3A, C, D, and E of the consent agenda? A is approval of minutes for July 28 briefing. C is approval of minutes for August 4th closed session. D is consideration of an ordinance for temporary road closings for the downtown trick or treat. And E is consideration of an ordinance for temporary road closings for the Christmas parade. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Okay, motion by Alderman Thompson, second by Alderman Boyer. All those in favor? It's unanimous. All right, Mr. Boyer, item 3B.
Okay, Keith is ready for this. In the minutes of the August 4 meeting, the topic was the rezoning for Kerner's Folly. The question was asked by Mayor Pro Tem Fulton if we had a conflict of interest. The minutes, I indicated that I serve on a committee on behalf of the town to look at the arrangement and the oversight of the working relationship, but it's worded so vaguely in the minutes that I think it's unclear. So Keith actually has a substitute wording for that to indicate that we don't have a conflict of interest.
Yes, this is on page 349. And it's the sentence that reads, Alderman Boyer noted that he serves on the town's committee, but not the Folly Board. And the alternate wording that I have come up with is, and I've reviewed this with Alderman Boyer, Alderman Boyer noted that he serves as one of 2 town-appointed members of the town's committee that provides oversight to the agreement with the Folly for the visitor center, but does not serve on the Folly Board. So it's a little bit more wordy than the sentence is currently in the minutes, but I think it clarifies the relationship between Alderman Boyer, the town's committee, and the Folly Board.
Okay, do I have a motion for approval of the minutes for August 4, 2021 regular meeting with that change? That would be item 3B.
I'll make that motion as corrected.
Motion by Alderman Boyer, second. Second by Alderman Thompson. All those in favor? It's unanimous.
Madam Mayor, could I make one comment?
Yes.
Because the wording that's in the minutes now says that Alderman Boyer is not a member of the Board of Directors of the Folly, but he serves on a committee for the Folly, and that would not be a conflict. I would hate for the minutes to at least reflect a position that might be inferred by anyone that if you served on the board of the Folly, there might be a conflict. And I have given an opinion to the board in the past. I do not think that any board members or the mayors sitting on a nonprofit on any of those that we have in town and those who request money of you, that constitutes a conflict of interest on your part. And I just want to make sure that you feel covered by that, meaning all of you. And if you should have any questions, I think it would be an appropriate time to ask them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wolf. All right. Is there anyone who'd like to address the board as a speaker from the floor? All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to item 6, Town Manager's Report and Miscellaneous. Mr. Swisher.
I have nothing, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Item 7, matters to be presented by the town attorney. Mr. Wolf.
John, I have nothing further tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Powell. Matters to be presented by the mayor and Board of Aldermen. Alderman Thompson.
I have nothing. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Cruz. Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Fulton.
No, ma'am, thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Boyer.
Nothing.
Thank you. Alderman Penix. Thank you. All right, if there's no further business before the board, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Alderman Thompson, second by Alderman Cruz. All those in favor? It's unanimous. This meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.
Good night, Kernersville.